Eric Brotman, a very, very warm welcome to the Humans versus Retirement podcast.
Dan, it's so much fun to be here. I'm ready and looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I'm super pumped, Eric. I think we're cut from the same other side of the pond cloth in terms of what I've understood and researched about you, your journey. So I'm really, really excited to dig into this conversation because I think the audience is going to get so much out of your wisdom and knowledge. Eric,
No pressure. No pressure at all. Right.
No pressure.
That's great.
And
Okay.
I've listened to some of your other stuff, and I know you can step up to the plate, so we're all good. Your firm, BFG Financial Advisors, and your journey to get where you've got to. You've got a wonderful firm that's across, I think we said before we hit record, in the 30 states in the United States of America. And you've built a wonderful firm, and you've built other things beyond that, which we'll get onto in a second. But I'd love for you just to spend a bit of time talking about you and your journey and where you are right now.
Sure. Thank you. I started in the financial service business in 1994 and spent a number of years getting credentialed and sort of taking my lumps and learning in an environment that really wasn't set up for a career path. I mean, I would argue there still isn't a terrific career path for folks who want to do what we do for a living. That said, I started BFG in 2003, so we're in our 21st year. Started it as a bootstrap. I had one full-time, one part-time employee, a small office space that I shared with another firm, and really said that I'm going to sink or swim. This is the big show. And fast forward, now we have 20 individuals here full-time. We have 8 financial advisors. You mentioned clients in 30 some odd states, and we've developed a couple of things, a couple of programs that I think are unique in our space that allows us to have strategic alliances with other firms where we don't necessarily see other financial advisors as competition. We prefer collaboration. So it's given us an opportunity to really grow and to have some fun doing it and to make a difference to a lot of people, which has been great.
Amazing. And your journey around kind of starting up and being part of that growth has led you to, I suppose, kind of maneuver away maybe from being what we would call a financial advisor or planner into leading the business, but becoming an author and creating courses and podcasts, etc. Talk to me a bit about that.
Anytime you do something for decades, there's a tendency for it to feel a little bit stale at times. And so I'm a serial entrepreneur by design, and so being 21 years in an organization surprised me, quite candidly. But I'm loving it. I'm having such fun that I want to continue to do it. But I did start a media company. I have written 3 books and a number of white papers and blogs and so forth. Hosted a podcast for 5 seasons, which was a wonderful time. And I'm doing a lot of speaking, a lot of work in creating financial literacy resources for the public in ways that we can reach people who can't necessarily afford to work with a financial advisor or who think they can. A lot of times people think financial advisors are only for the wealthy. And, estate planning, for example, people think you don't have an estate unless you're a super rich human, and that's just not true. And so I think we're dispelling some myths. And we've created a firm that does not require a minimum asset level, which makes us a unicorn because most financial advisory firms are trying to figure out how to only work with wealthier and wealthier and wealthier people. And while we certainly work with those folks and I think do a phenomenal job with them, we also know that we can reach a much larger audience and make a huge difference in the financial futures of not only families, but communities by doing it that way. So we've built a model that's very, very different in our space.
And I think that model that you've built actually puts you in such an amazing position to comment on the subject of retirement, because, I think so many people, as you've said, they come from retirement of a place of having significant, and wealth is the wrong word, having money, wealth is very, but it's kind of like, I can only afford to retire if, and I should only really plan my retirement if I've got $1 million or £1 million. And, my retirement doesn't really matter because I've only got this amount here. But the work that you've done in financial literacy and working with folks from all different kinds of backgrounds has led you to, I think, having a wonderfully rounded view on this really complex topic, and that's led you to write a brilliant book, which you told me before we hit record has got a new edition coming out this year, and you've got a great logo behind you for people that are on that are on video, and the title of the book is wonderful, right? Don't retire, graduate. So what I'd love for you to kind of discuss and to talk about, and let's riff on about for a while, is that topic: redefining retirement as a graduation. I think both of us are on the same page when I say that retirement is an outdated concept and mindset. So talk me through what you mean by don't retire, graduate, by redefining retirement as a graduation, and how people planning for or just in retirement can start to think about and live by that mindset.
Retirement is an outdated concept, and I actually think it's a fate worse than death. And let me, before people say, "Oh my gosh, that's blasphemous," let me explain. The concept of retirement was created in the 1800s, and actually in some cases before that. And it was really a way to get rid of the senior most members of a workforce so that younger people could come in, which is all well and good, except that they considered older members at age 40 at the time. And so that makes me one of the elder statesmen of that particular conversation. If you look at the word retire, and I don't have to tell you this because retire means something different in true English than it does in American. In English, retire is to go to sleep. You retire for the night. We don't say it that way here on this side of the pond. However, it's an important thing to mention is that retirement is a disappearing act. It's a retreat. It's a surrender. It's a giving up. It's a stopping. And if we're going to have longevity, which many of us are blessed with now, and it is a gift, then we can't stop working at 55 or 60 years old in the traditional way and rely on daytime TV and a couple of golf courses to keep us busy for what could be 40 years. That is a dreadful way to spend time. So I defy anyone to take a vacation longer than 2, 3, 4 weeks. Forget the fact that it's expensive, but imagine doing that and having nothing to do when you return. I think it's much more important to look at this as an advancement. So I consider retirement as the absence of needing to work, not the absence of work itself. If you're working for fun and you're doing things you love, it's not toil. We're not talking about, folks who dig ditches for a living, digging ditches till they're 87 years old. So let's be clear. I understand there are certain jobs, certain roles where you mustn't continue to do that. Physically you can't, or sometimes mentally you can't do certain things. But being active and getting to the point where if you don't need the money, if you've built financial independence, I don't care whether you're 35 or 85, to me, you're retired, gainfully retired. You have graduated to a point where work is optional. At that moment, when you consider the graduations in life, whether it's from grade school or whether it's from college or university or whether it's from graduate programs, when you graduate, yes, you're finishing something, but you're also moving up and on to something new. And I have seen a lot of retirees fail to qualitatively figure out what they want to do and what they want to be. Our podcast always asks folks what they wanted to be when they grew up. And I would ask somebody 73 years old, what do you want to be when they grow up? And they would chuckle because they thought they were up, but they're not. There's another stage. There's another chapter of life. And if we look at retirement as the absence of work entirely, we tend to lose our sense of identity. It's a really daunting thing to be in your 50s or 60s. And when people ask who you are, the first thing you say is, I'm an architect or I'm an accountant. Well, that's not who you are. It's what you do. Who you are is a father, a brother, a volunteer, a churchgoer, a soccer fan, whatever it is. I know I said soccer. I'm not supposed to say that. But at the end of the day, you get this idea that you're lots of things. You're not just what you do.
Yeah.
And so if you identify who you are with what you do, when you don't do that anymore, who are you? And that's a really sad, tragic way to go out. So I think we have to reinvent ourselves and grow.
I absolutely second and couldn't agree more. I think I love the term graduate. I think it's such an amazing way to think about it, and I think about all of the mini retirements I've done throughout
Mhm.
my career. I've graduated and retired through different things. I had a career in the City of London, and I retired from that to become a financial planner and do this and etc. So you kind of go through these different phases of life, and I think the key thing that you said there, Eric, that I just want to pull out on, it's the ending of one thing and the beginning of another. And I've got quite in depth in a Japanese concept of kenreki very over the last couple of months, and I've written about this. And that concept is one where the Japanese calendar lasts for 60 years effectively, and it's kind of like you do one cycle of the calendar, you get to age 60, and you start again. And one of the definitions of kenreki is second childhood. They see that as the second coming. And I love what you just said there around becoming childlike again. You know, what do you want to be when you grow up? Be curious. I think I've said to many people I work with and on this podcast before that I believe that when you retire or graduate or get to that phase of your life in your 50s and 60s, I think for the first time since you were probably between the ages of 10 and 15, you can probably be really curious. You can probably explore with some freedom. You don't feel shackled by, or you shouldn't feel shackled by money at that point. And I'm not talking about needing millions in the bank, but feeling about you have a plan about what you're retiring to or graduating to and where you're going from there. So, yeah, I think it's an amazing concept.
I love the idea of being a child again. In fact, I have a teenage daughter who I've convinced never to adult because it's a trap. And I think none of us should do it in the first place.
Yeah.
But you also said something that I think is, I think it's interesting to explore whether, in fact, all of us have the ability at 50 or 60 to be curious and to reinvent and to find these things. I think if you don't plan for that all along your working life, you can put yourself behind that eight ball where you really are stuck. And so starting to plan for your retirement in your 20s is not necessarily planning to be a multimillionaire, but it's planning to provide for your own opportunity at financial freedom, whatever that looks like to you. And all families are different. The word wealth means different things to different people. But being independent, having that level of freedom where you have the ability to say, you know what, I'm going to take a sabbatical, or I'm going to take a different role, or I'm going to do some volunteering or mission work, whatever's important to you. Or I'm going to take 6 months and find myself and then decide what I want to be when I grow up. Having the freedom and flexibility to do that is a gift, but it doesn't fall out of the sky. You have to plan for that for a very long time. And it's not linear, it's exponential. So you know as well as I do, and I don't believe retirement's a math problem, but there is math involved. And so for those of you who hate math, grin and bear it for 2 seconds, and that is that it is exponential. It's not a straight line to build wealth and to get to that freedom mark. It takes time, and it's more of a J. It's more of an exponential thing because of compounding interest. And so it takes money to make money. And the more you put away, the more that money can grow. The longer it can grow, the more likely you are to have that second childhood that you desire instead of feeling shackled. You used a great word, and no one wants to feel that.
Do you think also that sitting alongside compounding interest, could there be kind of compounding mindset here? Could we start to think about, again, because like you said, I do believe that that people will find it very challenging to feel like they can be free. Their mindset might have been very different for quite a long time. They might have, been in a career or done something that has really suppressed their inner creativity to it, or whatever that looks like, or their dreams or ambitions, to a level that they find it very difficult to find it somewhere. It's gone so far down that I can't get it.
Yeah.
So do you? One, have you come across that, I suppose, where people find it really tough? And also, can we start compounding our mindset? Because I think it's very difficult to cliff edge anything, to go from something on the Friday to be something else on the Monday. We need multiple years to compound our financial wealth. And also, we probably need multiple years to compound our human capabilities to take advantage of this time.
Well, I love that you said you don't sort of have a cliff there. I think it is a metamorphosis. I think it is an evolution for all of us. I read a book recently called From Strength to Strength, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember the author's name, but it's a phenomenal book. And it talks about how as we move through our careers and our adulthood, what we trade on and what we rely on in our 20s and 30s changes as we reach our 40s, 50s, and beyond. And that is, in your 20s and 30s, it's all about an intelligence curve. It's how educated are you? How much do you know? How on the cutting edge are you? And what can you bring to an organization or a career that has you on the literally the front lines of the most current thinking? And as you get older, that shifts from an intelligent mindset to a wisdom mindset. And so we have to work smarter, not harder, as we get older. Some of it's an energy issue, some of it's an enthusiasm issue, but some of it is let's play to our strengths. I mean, having an organization that's diverse means a lot of things to different people, but I do think having an organization or an entity that has significant generational diversity also brings an incredible wealth to the table because, for centuries, for eons, if you think about the villages all around the world, who had the biggest tent? The elders had the biggest tent. They were the wisest. They're the ones you went to when there was a really big problem that maybe they've seen before in their 70 or 80 or 90 years on Earth. We don't do that. And I can't speak for the UK, but in the US, we don't revere our elders. We put them out to pasture in a way that's tragic.
Hmm.
And so I do think it's a mindset. I do think it's a metamorphosis, but I also think it's trading on wisdom. And in a perfect world, I can tell you in my career, I no longer, and I'm still in classes, I'm still learning, but I don't trade on my intelligence anymore. I do trade on my wisdom, and surrounding myself with people who are on the cutting edge of the intelligence curve has been a great combination because I don't know about you, but I think clients, families who we support want to know that they're getting the latest and greatest information and that someone's really knowledgeable, but they also want to know that someone's been there before, been through it and seen those battles and been through recessions and my gosh, pandemics and Y2K bubbles and whatever else it is. I think there's an incredible marriage between the two that can make a great combination.
So, great advice and great thoughts. I think it's so powerful what you just said. A couple of observations that the Ken Reiki concept in Japan is one that I'll come back to because that reveres older people. I mean, the society in Japan and the culture in Japan is that it treats its elders better than any other and reveres its elders better than any other society in the world. I think from what I've read. And also, what you said around wisdom, knowledge, experience, and then kind of intellect. One of the things that I try and get across to everybody I work with is that you have an abundance of knowledge and wisdom that society is crying out for. If you think that you can't give back to society, you are wrong. There are companies now that are crying out for knowledge to come in. They've got clever young people, but like you said, the mix of intellect, of up-to-date modern intellect and old head wisdom and knowledge is such a powerful one. And companies now want that more so than ever. They're not going, oh, by the way, you're 65. I'm not even going to interview you. If you want to give back, and it can be volunteering. I've got clients that go and mentor young individuals and help to kind of impart their wisdom. If you want to have purpose in your 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s, you have got more opportunity than ever to give back. And I think that's a mindset shift as well, for anyone to go through, to realize that you have got the stuff lying in your heart and your head to be able to contribute significantly to society going forward.
I agree with you entirely, and I do think it's important for us to recognize that you lose it if you don't use it too. I mean, some of this is if any muscle will atrophy, and I know a brain is not particularly a muscle per se, although I think if you don't use it, you do lose it. And that's true with social skills. It's true with EQ and IQ. It's true of everything we do in life. And I think it's important to stay honed. There are websites. You go to LinkedIn and you try and network professionally. And I've often joked that if I see anybody whose profile says, Jane Smith retired, and that's all it says, it's like, oh, I've got to click on her. I can't wait to meet her. She sounds dynamic. She might as well say deceased, Dan.
Yep.
Yeah. How about volunteer, cheese lover, whatever in the world, anything, but not just retired, because it means game over.
Yeah. One thing I get a few people to do is I get them to design and draw their own business card. So I'm like, what would go on your business? If someone come up to you in a barbecue and said, like, what do you do? As you said about 15 minutes ago, most people, a modern day 56-year-old probably doesn't want to say, oh, I'm retired. What would be on that? Would it be full-time granddad? Would it be full-time grandma? Would it be trying to play the top 100 golf courses in the world? Would it be volunteer at the local food bank? Would it be expert dog walker? Would it be, whatever it, be creative, have 2 or 3 of them, have an answer for that question. And give yourself, I think identity is the right thing, as you said. I do see a bit of an identity crisis. And I'm a big believer when you step into a post full-time work world, when you start to step back, you've got an opportunity to create multiple identities. You don't have to have one anymore. On a Monday and a Friday, you can be granddad or grandma. On a Tuesday and Wednesday, you can be trying to lower my handicap. You can have these different things that you want to try and explore. And I think it's really, really vital that you create and work on those identities actually before you lose the one that's given you such purpose over the last, so many years.
Funny, I just attended a major financial conference on the West Coast of the U.S. and was gathering with contemporaries of mine in our 50s. And what I found was that there are an enormous amount of programs available to younger people. It's called G2, the second generation, the succession plan, the second generation. And there's lots of resources for the older guard, the 50-plus guard. But the information available to us is all about logistics. How do you monetize a business? How do you transfer ownership? How do you do the? None of it's about the emotional piece of it. And in these discussions, I found that I wasn't alone. I actually thought I was the only one going through this crisis. The idea of moving on from being a client-facing financial advisor to a CEO and a business developer and a visionary is something I've dreamt of for 20 years, and it's basically here. It's very close. And now I'm having a crisis with it, because I'm like, well, wait a minute. Did I lose my day job, or did I gain that next level? Did I graduate? And I'm not alone. A lot of folks are going through the same thing. And in fact, I encouraged this financial institution to put together study groups or retreats or something around the emotional and psychological factors of being G1, the first generation of a firm, because none of us, we're all grappling with the same stuff, and none of us knew that we weren't alone. And I think it's nice to be able to speak with kindred spirits about that.
And do you know what? Actually, a lesson for me there is that that we need to talk to people that are in similar situations, right? No matter what stage of life we're at, particularly retirement. I think there's not many retirement role models out there, and the role models aren't our parents or our grandparents, because their retirement, as you said, was fundamentally different to the thing that people in their 50s and 60s now. So I encourage anyone to network, go and speak to, and we encourage our clients to get together on multiple online and offline sources, talk to each other. You experience this, give back to people, or ask a question. I'm going through this at the moment. Has anyone experienced that before? And you'll find that you're not alone, and you can have wonderful conversations and help other people, and you can get help from other people if we just open up and talk about these phases in life and what we're going through.
If you're willing to be authentic and vulnerable, growth opportunities immense there. If you're not, you're really going to suffer in silence. I think in a lot of ways, I think it makes sense to share that. We're going through a lot of the same stuff, and the world is a complicated place, and it does feel like, and forgive the term, but sometimes financial advising feels like a young man's game, except that the average financial advisor is like 59 years old. So it might be a young man's game. And I use young man's colloquially because naturally there are some amazing women, including in our firm, who do great financial advising. However, I do think the industry itself is old and grappling with succession and where are people going to go to advice when this generation of advisors either retires, graduates, or dies, or quits, or what have
you. Yeah. It comes back to something you said, actually. I mean, I have managed to start working with people have chosen us to help them with their retirement plans based on the age of our business, right? I'm in my early 40s, my other director's in his mid 40s, Olivia, our other director's in her early 30s. Our team are all, from our para planners and technical staff are all in their 20s. And they've interviewed people and they've gone, actually, do you know what's really interesting for me is I want you to outlive my retirement and help my children.
Yes.
I don't want to hire someone that's probably going to sell their business and retire before I do.
Right.
And it comes back to that wonderful mix that you said around hiring young, intelligent, switched on people that are going to swallow all of the modern day regulations and then leave me to impart some wisdom on the learning that I've done, and you have a team of people that can support that. And I think it's an amazing attitude. I have had it from other financial planners over here where they go, "Oh, do you struggle working with people in their 60s because you're not that?" And I'm like, "No, they love it. They absolutely love working with me because of but that's the main reason."
Yeah. Now it sounds like we're doing a lot of things very similarly. We have 8 advisors. I'm the only one over 50. And we have folks in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, and do a lot of multi-generational planning. And none of my clients' kids want to work with me. They just don't. They want to work with somebody that speaks the same language, that had some things in common, that maybe is 5, 10, 15 years younger than they are, so that they will be there. I don't want my doctor to be older than me. Why would I want my financial advisor to be older than me? They're going to retire before I need them the most, which is when I try to pivot into financial independence. When a client pivots into financial independence, they're giving up a 40 or 45 year history of doing something they understand, which is accumulating assets. And now they have to turn it into something they don't understand and have never done before, which is creating income and figuring out the way that impacts taxes, the way it impacts longevity, the way it impacts insurances and lifestyle. They've never done it before. We've done it 100 times or more. But you want your advisor, your trusted advisor, to be there when you go through that. And so I do think it's important to have a second and even a third generation within the firm. It sounds like you're doing that, and that it does make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of leads into, but you mentioned you've mentioned a lot about financial literacy, and I know you do a load of work and you're massively passionate about this. And I want to ask you a question around that because I've seen that you've written about this before, and I love what you do here. Why do you believe wealth as a term is not reliant on maths as it is on financial literacy?
Couple of things. First, math can be done by a machine. You can plug various things in and the computer will spit out an answer for you. To me, that's not what retirement planning is. To me, it's marrying the quantitative, the qualitative, and the behavioral. Financial literacy means not just understanding your statement, but understanding why you're making certain decisions, why you're planning for certain long or intermediate term or short term goals, why you're using different types of strategies. It allows you behaviorally, psychologically, to understand the long game instead of just looking at a budget and saying, hey, there's money left over at the end of the month. I guess I'm in good shape. And so, to me, just like someone who isn't literate and can't read can plug in an audiobook and be read to, it's not the same. The fact that you can have a computer spit out an answer for you, to me, is not the same as understanding the whys of your behavioral decision making. And it's being financially literate allows you to look at, for example, a job offer, an employee benefits book, a financial aid offer for your child. I mean, all of the different decisions that we make, so many of them revolve around financial decisions. And I think you need both the emotional intelligence and the street smarts to make those decisions. And financial literacy, to me, is a dividing line between those who are likely to be haves and those who are likely to be have-nots. With the exception of folks who inherit or win a lottery or something, you're going to always have that. But for the most part, people who are building it themselves, who are self-made in whatever made means, are much more likely to get there, anecdotally at least, by understanding what they're doing and not just doing what they heard on the radio.
Do you think then some of the big mistakes that you've witnessed and some of the kind of innate fears and built-in fears of people is down to the fact that they are financial illiterate, not that they've, or they've not been educated, they don't understand? Because I think if they understand stuff, the nervousness and the fearfulness actually starts to go away. Is that something that you've witnessed?
It's only part of the story. Yes, but it's only part of the story. The bigger part of the story is the emotional impact.
Yeah.
It is very difficult. If you're a writer, you write various things. It is almost impossible to edit your own work.
Yeah.
Because you write it, and when you read it, you're reading and seeing what your brain meant to write, whether you wrote it or not. You need somebody else to do it. I think a financial advisor becomes an incredibly important accountability partner, because it left to our own devices, we will make emotional decisions around money. Casinos have been built on them. And I don't like to compare investing to gambling, but at the end of the day, there's certain aspects of it that are similar. For example, if you sit down at a casino with $100 and you're prepared to lose that $100, it's your entertainment fund and you can afford to lose it and it's just there for fun, that's great. But if you go to play and you turn that $100 into $300, what people tend to do is, instead of taking that money and going and buying a dinner, they think, oh, this isn't my money, it's house money, and they play until they lose it all. And then worse yet, they lose that $100 and they say, I'm going to go to the ATM, I'm going to go to the bank and get another 100 because I got to get that back. Investors do the same thing. It might be a more robust, sophisticated conversation, but it's the same thing. They get attached emotionally to a purchase price of a security or of a company that's their pet project or whatever it is. And there tends to be there's so many biases. The books have been written. There's now an industry around behavioral finance and understanding why we do what we do. I have a financial advisor, not because I don't understand this stuff. I can do it in my sleep, but because I like having an accountability partner, just like I like having a trainer, because I know how to do sit-ups. But if somebody doesn't say drop and give me 20, I might not do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think one of the conversations that I have a lot, one of the biggest fears I see is spending money. People are very, very fearful about running out of money.
Yes.
Therefore, that they don't end up spending the money at the time they should spend it, i.e. when their health and time is on their side, that real window of opportunity that you've got it. And I think a lot of that fear is down to financial literacy and financial and understanding of it. I can show them the prettiest cash flow charts in the world that shows them that they're absolutely going to be all right. It still doesn't take away the fear of running out of money, because they simply aren't educated enough to be able, and this is not saying they need a degree in this stuff, but if they understand just some of the foundational things, present evidence. I love working when it comes to thinking about, retirees running out of money, and on average, how much money's left on the table when people hit their 90s, and in spending falls, and you present facts and figures to people. They're not then living in this, virtual made up world that they've been brainwashed into because they've seen their friends or they've observed things. They're living in reality. They're living in their own reality, and you can bring that to them, and that starts to free stuff up as well.
It does, but let me pose this question to you, and I ask you sincerely because I'm in the same boat. What do you think it feels like? How do you think it's different if there's either a market loss or a spend or something happens and you have to spend money you didn't count on? How psychologically different do you think it is when you're working and can go make more versus when you're not working and maybe it feels like your resources are finite? because I get the sense that spending money when you're working feels totally different than spending money when you're no longer working, because it feels
Absolutely.
like when you're working, you're still planting trees in the money forest, right?
Yeah.
That you've got to grow. If you're planting new trees, it's yielding new fruit. When you're no longer working, no longer receiving a paycheck, at least in the traditional way, what you've got is an orchard here, and you can pick the fruit forever, and new fruit will come every year if you do it right. But if you start chopping branches off, you will have less and less and less fruit by definition. And I imagine, I'm asking you, don't you think that that's a legitimate, scary experience that we haven't personally felt yet? So maybe we can't identify with it quite as much?
Absolutely. Yeah. That comment is all the time. It's kind of like if this thing was being replaced, it would be easier. I feel like there is, the amount of people that I speak to that,
Mhm.
their initial comments about their asset base and their spending is, oh, I've got this money here. If you can just protect that for me. And so I want to die with that amount. I'm 60. Here's £1,000,000. If I can die with £1,000,000 and live off the interest,
Uh-huh.
and I get it, right? It's again, we are, that is rooted back to when we were still in the forest, scurrying around, not worrying, not thinking about what's in the bushes, running away because it's fearful. We're not going to confront the issue because we might get our head bitten off. Security, financial security of a regular income is, I think, you can't understand the security blanket that is, and then you pull that blanket away. So absolutely. And I think that's why one of the jobs that I absolutely see myself being able to do for people is to help them feel like they've got the utmost freedom to spend
Mhm.
that money while still retaining some security blanket. That's why I do believe actually working should be part of most people's retirement plans, right?
Yes.
If you can
Yes.
if you can go and earn £5,000, £10,000 or dollars a year, it could be absolutely immaterial to your overall financial plans. But what it will give you is an emotional security blanket to go and spend money and create memories and experiences. Don't care about the money. Go and just earn some to replace some. I think
Yeah.
it's.
I think that's sage advice. I love it. It makes complete sense.
Um, I want to. So if we think about wealth not reliant on maths and as it is on financial literacy, and we think about that kind of educational piece, and if people can start to, I suppose, put a bit more time into their retirement, as much time as they put into planning a 2-week holiday or vacation, that'd be really cool. So
Yes.
read up on
So
this,
true.
do a bit of
Yeah.
education, understand this stuff.
Yeah.
But also, I think you've talked about this before. Why do you believe that achieving kind of financial independence, which is a phrase I use all the time and I love, doesn't actually require being good with money?
Well, sometimes if you're just if you have an abundant mindset and you've been not just a high earner but a good saver, you can outsource to a financial advisor or institution to be good with money on your behalf. You can hire somebody to be good with your money. I think that creates accountability partners, but I also think it's important to understand what they're doing. First of all, you want to make sure you're not being taken advantage of. So it helps to be able to root out the bad actors. But assuming you find a reputable, reliable person to help you take care of that, if your financial advisor tells you you need to put away £50,000 a year, and you do that and they handle the details and you can reach financial independence without having a clue what you're doing, as long as you're able to meet that threshold and you're in regular communication. So I don't think becoming financially independent requires you to know what you're doing. I think it's a benefit to know what you're doing, and more importantly to know why. I think it's I understand how certain things work, but I'm not going to do them myself. For example, if I go to the dentist and I need a root canal, I want to know that my dentist really understands it. I'm not performing it on myself. I'm going to say, all right, I have somebody who's a professional who knows how to do this and can handle this for me. I understand what I'm doing, but I'd really like to understand why. Like, what is the benefit of this action? And then here's the person I'm going to entrust to take that action for me. I think financial advisors are that to a great degree. People can do this themselves. I tell every single client, everyone I speak to, that we're not neuroscientists. We're not surgeons. There's nothing we do, Dan, I don't want to demystify this too much, but
I
there's
agree.
nothing we do that people can't do for themselves.
Absolutely.
They just don't or don't want to. Either they don't know how, or they're afraid of it, or they would prefer to do it with somebody else, or they just don't. They just don't. That's not how they want to spend their time. And and I think we can provide an incredible outcomes for people who are willing to entrust us with that, and it's a privilege to do it every day. But there's nothing we do that people can't do themselves. They just have to decide that they would rather entrust that. I can mow my own lawn. I don't. I know how to do it. I've done it before. I did it a lot as a kid, trying to make $10 at a time. But I don't. That's not how I want to spend my time. I would rather have somebody else do that, so I can spend my time doing something that's more impactful, meaningful, uh, for me. And I think personal finance is very similar.
Yeah, I interviewed the brilliant Dr. Daniel Crosby really early in the podcast. He's a good friend, and I love his books. And he said something really profound. And we talked about how money can make you happy, and we're going to get onto happiness in a minute. But one of the things that he said is that if you spend your money on things that take away anxiety and suck up your time, spend your money on that, and spend
Mm-hmm.
so. If you think about that, I'm the same. I talk about washing my car, right? I mean, I could wash my car, but I choose not to because it just bores me to tears and it sucks up my
Uh-huh.
time. So it's the best
Right.
£10 that I spend.
Right.
But also other stuff, right? I mean, again, like you said, I think if we start thinking about things that we could do, but actually if we did do them, it would cause us more anxiety and take up a lot of our time. So stuff like performing dentistry on yourself, right?
Yeah.
That, as you said, I mean, it's a bit extreme, but it's this very, very similar.
Extreme.
But it's very similar. And I think finances is one of those. I think that what people tend to do is they go, I can do this myself, and they get themselves in a whole heap of trouble that they
Yep.
then sometimes feel embarrassed to admit. And I think one of the
Yes.
great things that we can do is to give them a no judge zone. I don't
Yes.
care what you've done. I don't care the mistakes that you've made. Let's move forward. And I think it takes a lot of courage for people that have maybe tried to do this thing themselves, have ended up getting themselves in a bit of a mess, to then reach out forward and go, actually, do you know what? I need some help on this.
At the risk of having this go directly to his head, I also am friendly with Dr. Crosby, and Daniel Crosby's books are awesome. When I say behavioral finance,
Yeah,
I equate that with him. I think he's brilliant, and have read his books, and they have impacted the way that I address certain topics with clients, and also even with family members, with my own child.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to get on to happiness then. Let's go there, because that's a great. I didn't plan that segue. I must be getting quite good at this. So
It's not your first show. Yeah.
When we first made contact to record this episode, you sent me a really cool little message about what you want to talk about.
Yeah.
And you haven't given me what this is, which I'm really intrigued. You said about the 3 secrets of the happiest retirees. So what are they, and how can people implement them?
Well, I told you before the show I was going to put you on the spot and have you guess, but that just seems mean. So, yes, I have anecdotally discovered what I consider the 3 secrets to the happiest retirees, having watched lots of people do it well and lots of people, unfortunately, not do it as well. The first secret is to be debt-free. And not all debt is bad debt, and I understand sometimes there's leverage for business or real estate or other things. But generally speaking, having to make debt payments while you are not working and earning is a daunting task, and the idea of not owing anyone anything is a anxiety reducing sleep at night bonanza. So I would say number 1, be debt free, or at the very least, adverse debt free. The second thing is to take care of your health, to take care of yourself, because I liken health and wealth a lot. I think they're very similar. It is much easier to stay wealthy than to get wealthy. And by that same token, it is much easier to stay healthy than to get healthy. So if you have worked to earn lots of money at the expense of your well-being, at the expense of your health, by not taking vacations or seeing doctors or doing the meditation or the yoga or the exercise or the nutrition or any of the things that matter to you, you will find yourself being a very wealthy but very unhealthy human, and you will not be a happy retiree. At the end of the day, we can't always control our health. Sometimes it's illness and other things that happen. But to the extent we can control it, The happiest retirees are people who took care of themselves all along the way and didn't wake up one day retired and say it's time to hit the gym. So that's number two. And number three, and we did talk about number three earlier, though not in this context, and it's that the happiest retirees have a sense of purpose. They have a reason to get out of bed every morning that gets them excited to do so. I find that people who don't have that reason to get out of bed will start sleeping later and later and later, and then eventually there are folks who wear their pajamas all day and don't even get dressed anymore, and that's tragic. It's sad. So if you can be debt free, you don't owe anybody anything. You've taken care to the extent you can control it. You've taken care of your health. You've gotten your own physical oil changed on a regular basis to take care of the machinery, right? And you have a reason to get out of bed that excites you. And it could be grandkids. It could be playing the old course. It could be volunteering at the food bank. It could be consulting. It can be anything you want, but a reason to get out of bed every morning. The happiest retirees have those three things in common. And if there are some I've missed, I'll gladly add a fourth, but those are the ones that I've come across.
That just brilliant. I absolutely concur 100% with that. The thing about debt's interesting, isn't it? Because you get that. I have the conversation quite a lot. There's many retirees that I start to work with that have no debt, right? They've done a great job already and they understand. But there's many that still carry debt in, and they almost want. We come back to what you said earlier on, and I've sketched about this and talked about this a lot. That retirement is more of a human problem than it is a math problem, right? Fundamentally, we believe that. So people come to us and they go, "Oh, can you tell me whether it makes financial sense to pay off my debt? Can you run the numbers? Can you tell me where the break point is? Can you tell me, shall I hold on to, will the investments return more than the debt repayments and all of this stuff?" And that's the wrong place to start. The right place to start, in my opinion, is how do you feel about having debt? And does that debt provide you with some sort of weight around your neck or on your shoulders? And if it does, I don't care what the numbers say. This is not a financial equation to solve. This is a human problem to get over. And I think 9.9 times out of 10, when you have that conversation, people will want to pay off the debt because ultimately they will feel freer and they will spend a bit more money and they'll feel easier because they do feel so. I presume that's kind of what you've seen as well.
Yeah, and there are certainly quantifiable academic reasons not to pay it off sometimes.
Yep.
But like you, I do think that being at peace, sleeping at night, feeling comfortable matters more than any of that. And, during your working life, I could argue that, boy, you have a really low rate mortgage. You ought to just hang on to it. You're making money. Just keep paying it. That is arbitrage in its own way. That's fine. But once you're retired, it would be so much better not to have it, even if it's cheap, even if it's favorable.
Absolutely.
Excuse me.
Absolutely. And just picking on the others, I just want to, because I think it's vital. The health one is vital here because I talk a lot, and I mentioned before about this window of spending opportunity. Yes, we are living longer, but I don't think health span is necessarily, hugely well understood. We're not necessarily healthier longer than we have been. Modern medicine keeps us alive longer. And I know there's lots of different things that are reversing aging and we might be healthier longer, but for the most part, we are going to fundamentally be healthier in our 60s than we are in our 70s, than we are in our 80s, than we are in our 90s.
That's right.
So having good health and having the ability to take advantage of good health and front loading some of those plans that you have, I think is really, really a really fundamental part of planning. But also understanding that as we move through the generations, we might need our money to do things for longer. So it creates all different types of retirement planning scenarios and purposes. If you had to say to me, pick, that would have been my first one. If you'd have asked me the question, I would have gone for purpose, because again, I think we undervalue all of the non-financial things that work has given us for a period of time, and purpose is absolutely one of those.
I agree, which is why I do that bronze, silver, gold. I go in reverse order so that the grand finale is the top answer. It's like doing the Letterman show back in the day. I agree. If you had to choose one of those things, and Health isn't something anyone would choose against at the end
No.
of the day. But without a sense of purpose, what good is it? I mean, we have this. I've heard it said that this life we're living right now is not a dress rehearsal. This is it. This is the performance.
Hmm.
Make the most of it. Do all the things that you can do. And young retirees, and by that I don't mean folks who retire younger than the government standard. I mean healthy retirees who are able to be active, who can take the trips and do the hikes and be active with their grandkids. Invariably will spend a little more money during those years, but will be so thoroughly happy that it's worth it, because then there's a gap. There's years between, and I know you know this, but there's years between the really active years and potentially the late, sort of unfortunate, sick kind of years where you really don't do as much and you don't spend as much money. You're not buying new clothes for your trip to wherever. I mean, you're just not doing it. And so the things retirees spend money on, I find that the inflation rate, and I have not seen this published anywhere, maybe it exists, that the inflation rate for retirees is higher than the inflation rate for everybody else. And the reason for that is that the things retirees spend money on are not inflating like bread, milk, and gasoline, which inflate enough anyway. But think about it. You're talking about healthy people are using it for leisure and entertainment. Well, that grows by more than the CPI, right? If you're not healthy, it's medical care, it's healthcare costs. Well, we know those are spiraling in lots of ways. And if you have enough abundance, sometimes you're also helping grandkids with education because the parents can't afford to do it. So if you think that the things you're spending the most money on in retirement are health, are leisure and entertainment, medical care and education, then we have to factor in a higher inflation rate after your working years than during your working years in order to do a good job, I think.
Yeah. There's two observations before I kind of on that. Before I want to ask you one last question before we wrap up. But one observation is that all three of those secrets to a happy retirement have nothing to necessarily do with money. Maybe the debt one, but we're not really talking about money there. We're talking about health and purpose, and I think debt is around kind of a freedom type thing that comes about.
Yeah.
And excuse me. And number two is that to do this requires planning and intention as well, right? So, like you said, you don't just wake up and go, "All right, I'm going to be debt free. I'm going to go to the gym, and I've found my purpose." This will take some time and some thought and some uncomfortable conversations with your spouse or partner, and some uncomfortable conversations with other people to get this right.
Yeah, there's an entire section of my book that at the end talks about the decisions you have to make the couple of years before you retire, and a lot of them have to do with what you want to be when you grow up, and how are you going to find that sense. I don't think you wake up one day and you have it. Even think about it. When you're trying to grow your career, we all instinctively know that we have to build our network. If you want to be an engineer, you need to grow your network in the engineering community to get a job and to know the right people there. Well, if in retirement you're planning to either do consulting or you're planning to work at the food bank, it's better not to wake up one day and go, all right, now where's the food bank? It's better to already have been a volunteer, already know the people, and be able to go deeper in it and find your real calling there, rather than just showing up day one and saying, now what?
Yeah. Again, you said sage advice is like, it's just, that is such a fundamental part of the shift that I think people need to do. It's the mindset around planning and intention and making it happen for yourself is so vital. Eric, this has been such a brilliant conversation. I've made so many notes and gleaned so much from it. And I know the audience will do so too. One final question. What does financial freedom look like to Eric Brotman?
Well, I can answer that question in two different ways, which is cheating, I realize, but I'm going to do that anyway because you asked me. I get to do that. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. On the one hand, financial freedom quantitatively, what it means to me is it means I have a level of abundance where I never have to think about the possibility of running out of money, and I can continue to do whatever I want to do within reason. I'm not buying private jets, but within reason, I can live the way I live now, indefinitely without worrying about it. That's the quantitative answer. qualitatively, it's figuring out a way to use the abundance that I'm blessed with to really make a difference in our community, in our industry, in my family, in our world. And figuring out what that looks like is going to take time. And when you're busy and you're working 50, 60 hours a week, you don't really have time to sit and ponder that. So as I'm shifting a little bit now, I'm working fewer hours than I had. I still feel like it's full time, but I'm working fewer hours than I had. And it allows me to have some time to start to conjure up what that's going to look like. And so I would say, Dan, I would say check back with me in 5 years. I think I'll have a better answer on the qualitative side. The quantitative side is very easy for me. It's what I do for a living and I get it. The qualitative side, I don't know yet. And that's the best answer I can give you is I don't know what I want to be when I grow up yet. And I'm actively trying to figure it out.
And that's okay, right? We don't have to know the answers.
Well, that's good because I don't.
But the lesson there for people is that don't feel like you need all the answers written down.
Right.
You can go on a journey and explore and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean I am discovering more about myself. I'm getting to know myself better than ever in my life because I'm allowing myself not just the time but the desire. I mean, I'm acting on the desire to do it. I'm getting to know myself in a different way, and so far so good. I mean, it's a metamorphosis. It's a journey.
Eric, this has been, as I said, such a great conversation. I encourage everyone to go and get Eric's book. I'm going to put links in the show notes to the old version, or the old edition, but the new edition's coming out. So
later this year, second edition later this year.
So we do that. You've got some great podcast episodes that talk about this stuff in more detail. So all of those links will be on there for people to check out. So look, again, just leaves me to say a massive, massive thank you for joining us today. It's been such a great conversation.
It's been a ton of fun. I knew it would be, and it was a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. And that just leaves me to say thank you to everybody once again for joining us on the Humans versus Retirement podcast. Until next time, you take care.